Hi. In the Stockton Creative and Healing Arts community, we always like to start our meetings with gratitude. So I'm going to ask you to join me in throwing your shoulders back, opening up your lungs, opening up your heart, and giving gratitude to the Yokuts, the native people of this land. We want to thank them for honoring and preserving the land, and we want to let them know that we are grateful to be living here. Okay, let's jump right in, and we're going to talk today about climate change. I know that there are many of you who are probably saying, what the heck is climate change? How is climate change relative to my life? Where would I find the time to do anything about climate change? I've got 3 children, 1 8-hour job, a 3-hour commute, laundry, dirty clothes, right? How would I possibly find the time to devote to climate change or participating in any activities around climate change? Well, I'd like to introduce myself, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am and how I found ways to integrate sustainable eco practices that are related to climate change into my life and into my art practice. My name is Yasmin Sabur. I'm a professional textile artist. Basically, that means that I put color and design on fabric using natural plant dyes. I'm located in Garden Acres, San Joaquin County, California, right outside the city of Stockton. And I want to let you know that I am not a scientist, I am not an engineer, I'm not a philanthropist, I'm just like you and just like your neighbors. And every day, just like you, I strive to live my best possible life. So I want you to join me in this conversation because climate change affects all of our lives, and it affects the lives of all human beings on this planet and all of the life forms that occupy this planet. So, quick definition. What is climate change? It's a change in the normal weather patterns that have an effect on local, regional, and global areas of the earth. Real simple definition. If you live in California, you don't even really have to ask what climate change is and what are the effects of climate change. We see them and we live with them every day. We have mudslides on the coast. Parts of Highway 1 fallen into the ocean. We have floods. We have fires. And who did not absolutely and positively have their heart broken at the devastating fire that occurred in Paradise? We can all relate to that. We can relate to what happened to that community, and we can relate to the lives that were lost. We have crop damage, which is incredible when you think that Stockton is located in the Central Valley. We are the breadbasket of the United States, right? And we have to wonder what's happening to our economy and to the lives of people who are affected by the changes that climate change brings about in the economy. We also have droughts. So a good example of this is where I live. So 2 blocks from me goes straight into farmland. And closest to me are the cherry orchards. Last year and for a couple of years before that, the crops were damaged by heavy rains. This year, we're looking at less rain, but we're also looking at less blossoms. Less blossoms mean less cherries. So the groups of people who are affected by these conditions who work with cherries are the farmers, the farm workers, and then a whole set of people who we don't really think about very much. Once the cherries come into the plant where they're processed, there are people who grade them, there are people who pack them, there are people who inspect them, okay? There's a whole transportation system that has to move the cherries from garden acres to a port where they're sometimes imported to Japan. So when the climate conditions affect the production of the cherries, my neighbors lose their jobs. The woman who lives next door to me works at a cherry processing factory for probably 2 months of the year. She collects unemployment, and then she goes and works the next crop. So when I go to the community center to take a class, the line for food boxes increases because my next door neighbor didn't work at the cherry processing plant this year, which means that her 2 young children are probably food deprived. So this has a direct impact on my community. So I'm a member of that community, and I want to talk a little bit about what I do and the direct impact that climate change has on being an artist and a sustainable artist, working basically with fabric, dye, and water. Everybody wears t-shirts, right? And I want you to stay with me on this because we're going to visualize just a little bit. It takes 650 gallons of water to produce a t-shirt from seed, cotton seed, all the way to a finished t-shirt that a retailer will purchase from a wholesaler to sell in a store so that you can buy it. Okay, so if you drank a gallon of water a day, right, and you stored it somewhere, at the end of the week you would have 70 gallons. 650 gallons of water, okay, probably would not fit in your garage, in your house, in whatever area you store water in. That's how much water is used to manufacture a single t-shirt. So this is a new t-shirt. What happens to old t-shirts? Old t-shirts wind up in landfills. Okay. 5% of all landfills are composed of textile. T-shirts is fabric, fabric is textiles, waste. 15% of that waste is recycled. 85% of textile waste winds up in landfills. So the next thing that happens, and the next thing that really happened with me in my practice, and I should back up a little and say that I've always worked on natural fiber fabrics, so that synthetic fabrics have never been an issue for me. I've always worked with recycled fabrics, so I've always made good use of the Salvation Army and Goodwill. I get sheets, I get linens, I get t-shirts, I get shirts, I get whatever, but all recycled. Okay. The next part of my practice revolves around dyes, and there are actually 2 main categories of dyes. The first is synthetic dyes, and then the second is natural dyes, most of which are plant-based. A few, especially recognizable in San Joaquin County, are plant-based, the main one being Cochineal, which is a bug, a parasite that lives on the nopal cactus. And if you drive by and you see cactus that have these little white dots like all over them, right, that's the Cochineal. And if you grab it and squeeze it, right, this gorgeous, 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 deep carmine red, right, will come out. And that's the dye. And it's used all the way down through Peru. in the Americas. Okay, but what happens if you're using synthetic dyes? And they're made out of chemicals. Okay, so at factories, which is where most clothing is dyed, 10 to 15% of the synthetic dye is released into the water stream. The dye is toxic and poisons the wastewater systems. 40,000 to 50,000 tons of dye is released globally into wastewater systems. Okay, so, what's the big deal about that? Okay. The really, really big deal about that is the dye discolors the water. Okay. It means that the sun and the light are not able to work their way into the water system in the same way that naturally colored water is. The lack of sunlight kills the algae, okay? What are algae, okay? They are the first step in the food chain, okay? Because the algae are being destroyed, right? It means that just becomes a circle or a cycle where our food production from that lowest point on is affected by the toxins and the lack of sunlight in our waterways. And one of the keys about that cycle is that, we're organisms. So you might not be able to relate to algae, but you can relate to being a human being. This whole toxic chemical process with the T-shirts and the synthetic dyes, okay, also affects us because our skin is an organism. It breathes, right? And whatever it comes into contact with, right, it allows into our systems and our bodies. So you're wearing T-shirts, right, that have been dyed and are full of toxic chemicals, right? And they are next to your body. Okay, just a thought. Okay, so when I looked at all this and when I started dyeing fabric, I used aniline dyes, definitely a chemical. I used acid dyes. I worked with, some of this is funny, I used to clean my oil-based ink blocks with turpentine and gasoline. I was masked up. In fact, I had a full, I don't know the right word for it, but the mask that has the nose on it for when I did a lot of my work. My studio was not a safe place. It wasn't safe for me, and it wasn't safe for anybody who came in contact with it. And some things kind of let you know when something smells, reeks of a chemical smell, and it's there for weeks at a time, you kind of think, oh, well, this might not really be that good for my health. And it isn't. So I made a switch from the chemical dyes to a series of synthetic dyes that are called Procyon. And this had a big impact, these dyes had a big impact on our lives because it precipitated a change from the traditional natural dyeing methods that had been used throughout the world up until the middle of the 19th century, right? And because of the ease of creating color on fabric and because of the availability, right, these dyes became prominent. I had a conversation with a friend of mine and she was talking about blue jeans fading. So some of you will remember that back in the day when I think we used to wet the blue jeans, really, to get into them because they were just that tight, right? But then you might have blue legs for, maybe 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 washings, right? And that was indigo. That was a natural dye. It was indigo. It faded, it aged beautifully. The blue jeans took on a glowing patina, okay? That doesn't happen nowadays because Levi Strauss, the blue jean manufacturer coming out of San Francisco, converted to using synthetic dyes, though they have a small project that actually uses dye, indigo, from a farm project in Tennessee called Stony Creek. Okay. But I started out with this series of dye called Procyon. Okay, still synthetic, still chemical, right? But I went to what they call low water immersion processes. So instead of running a sink or a vat full of water and dyeing, probably, maybe the process took 45 minutes to an hour, right? I went to using small containers that were filled with dye that I set out in the sun, right, and left for 24, 36 hours, right? The longer dye time means that the fabric absorbs more of the dye, which means that when you go to wash the fabric out, you don't have to rinse it as many times because most of the dye is gone. And there's a big difference between a bathtub full of dye and a little plastic container, glass container, no plastic please, glass container full of dye and water. So that was kind of fun. And I started a Facebook group for dyeing. And one of the women that I met was a professor in Canada. She works in textiles and fiber. And she said to me, we became friends, and she said to me, why are you using those synthetic dyes? And I was like, I don't know, I guess, I'm stuck, 50 years into this thing, I know them, right, like the back of my hand. She was like, we'll give natural dyes a try. So she said, you don't even have to invest any money. She said, go pick up some eucalyptus from out in the parks, grows all over, right, take it home, boil it and keep it boiling, right? Drop your fabric in and see what happens. I was thrilled, right? I got these deep, rich cinnamon browns. I mean, really, really beautiful color, and I was hooked. So I moved from the low water immersion processes into natural dyes. And that's kind of been my journey, and that's where I am now. I wish that you were a live audience because I'd really like to hear about your journeys, and I'd also like to discuss with you what can I do, okay, to join in this really life or death battle that we have to engage in around climate change. This is like psychology. This is behavior modification. You've got to stick with being active for as long as we're all here. But we all know, like dieting, as you can see, I don't have much success with, right? Okay. You got to break the thing down into doable parts where you can ingrain the behavior, feel some success, and then move on to the next step. So these are some suggestions that I have for you. The first one is probably the biggest one, okay? Just buy one t-shirt from a thrift store once a month or once every 2 months. Okay? Just take one t-shirt that you're not wearing anymore and donate it to a charity or to a thrift store, okay? That will help our landfill. Don't try, unless you really think you can do it, to change your wardrobe to all recycled or all organic all at once. Don't try and clean out your whole closet, because if billions of us will donate just one t-shirt, if billions of us will buy just one recycled t-shirt, okay, we can really have an immense impact, and that's something that you can do. Okay. This one is hard for a lot of people, but it is of immense benefit. So this is number 2, not number 1. Number 1's easy, okay? Number 2 is figure out a way how you can afford to buy produce and groceries that are produced locally, and even if it's only one item, figure out an item that you will enjoy eating, okay, that is grown organically. Okay. Sometimes cars do contribute to climate change, but think bigger than that, right? Think trucks. Think transporting groceries from the border at Mexico of food that was grown in Chile, right? How did it get here? How much gasoline, how much energy was used? How much pollution was created? How many emissions went into getting that food from Chile to Stockton? So we are lucky. We've got the farmers market downtown, underneath the crosstown. We've got the farmers market across from J.C. Penney's at the mall. And if you go there, try and go to the park with your children, not to the mall, because we're trying to cut down on consumerism. Go support those farmers. They're in our area. Okay. We get mad at PG&E, and we really want to say that the fires are their fault. But the fact of the matter is, many of the elements that go into creating those fires are based on climate change. Okay. PG&E does have some fault, but not completely. So when you get those email messages from PG&E, or you open your bill and there's that little blue and white paper that suggests things, pay attention to them. Weatherize your house. Cut down on your energy usage. Okay. These things are important, right? And they contribute to fighting climate change. Plant a garden. Plant a tree. One of the guys out of Fuentes is interested in forestation. I think he's planted thousands of trees. And he says that sometimes he gets discouraged because he'll plant a tree and then he'll go back 2 or 3 months later. The tree is dead, or somebody's knocked it over or taken it home with them, right? But that's not what's important. The thing that is important is that you plant the seed, right? That you contribute to cleaner air in the environment. And trees are expensive, but seeds are relatively inexpensive, right? Get some seeds, start a garden. Stribling has a wonderful community garden. Boggs Track has a wonderful community garden. Where I live, everybody has a garden, right? So we've got, in addition to marijuana, we have tomatoes, we have peppers, we have corn, we have lemon, we have onions, right? That first one may be the biggest crop, but we've also got all kinds of other crops growing in my area, right? So plant a garden. And not only plant a garden, after you plant it, every time you plant something, right, you're going to have an abundance for that short time, right, that plant is in fruit, right? So this really gives you an opportunity to meet with your neighbors, set a basket outside, say free, take some, right? You will find this especially helpful if you're growing zucchini because it's a monster crop. People at your job will begin to avoid you, right? Your neighbors will go back in their houses when they see you coming out with a basket full of zucchini. Your family will probably start eating out, right? And you learn more recipes for dealing with zucchini than you thought existed in life, right? Grow it, give it away, open heart, freely. I was going to talk a little bit about gray water, which kind of gets into, and the use of gray water in gardening, which kind of gets into household chores, but also the way that we take care of our bodies, because there isn't any reason to use a organic, biodegradable, earth-friendly soap in the shower, right? And put a bucket beside you, right? And get up in the morning and water your plants with the water from your shower. It's not going to hurt anything. I think when most people think about gray water, they probably think about washing machines. One of my neighbors has a hose that goes from the washing machine drain directly into their garden. Okay. You want to make sure that you're using earth-friendly bio products, ecologically safe products, okay, when you're doing this. You want to keep, if you're using water from your sink, you want to keep meat scraps and fat, right, out of the water, so you just have a separate bucket for that kind of oil and that kind of grease. Okay, so then that takes us into composting, right? So then you want to save your kitchen scraps, and you want to save them for two reasons. You can dye fabric with them, right? But you can also use them to enrich the soil in your garden. The family-friendly project that I want to leave you with is creating a solar oven with your children and then actually using it to cook your food. In several parts of the world, solar ovens are made and they're distributed, right? It's free, it's a free energy source, but they're really fun, and it's one of those kind of miraculous, transformational experiences, really for adults. I'm thrilled every time I see it, right? But how you use foil, a cardboard box, a piece of glass in the sun, right, to actually be able to cook your food, it's kind of mind-blowing, right? The kids will love it. Make sure you have plenty of marshmallows on hand, right, so that they can make s'mores and have a good time. So the bottom line is, first of all, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. The earth appreciates it. Thank you for making every effort that you can to ensure a healthy earth, to ensure that our children and our grandchildren and the generations after us have a planet to live on and to enjoy. Thank you, because I am confident that you're going to leave here and take at least one step towards battling this problem, this issue, this overwhelming situation that we face and share with every living organism on this planet. And just, live your best life. Thank you.